Retro Gaming Radio 2003. Keep it retro.
Retro Gaming Radio.
Retro Gaming Radio.
Retro Gaming Radio. This is Don Bluth. Hi, this is Conway Ho.
David Crane, the developer of Pitfall.
And you're listening to Retro Gaming Radio.
Retro Gaming Radio 2003. Keep it retro. Hello, folks. Welcome to the October 2002 edition of Retro Gaming Radio, our second show of the 2003 broadcast season. This is Shane R. Monroe, your host, and welcome to the program. We got a really great show this month. In addition to the long-awaited David Crane Part 2 interview, we have a new all-original rant for you about companies that don't want to make money for a change. We also have a follow-up on the Act Labs light gun. We're going to give you a little more insight on that. We are going to have our mini interview with Don Bluth. Now, if you don't know who Don Bluth is and you've been listening to the show, shame on you. Don Bluth, of course, is the animator behind Dragon's Lair, Secret of Nim, American Tail, etc., etc. Basically, one of my heroes. We're going to get inside look at Dragon's Lair 3D from the man himself, Don Bluth, and a bunch of other stuff. So stick around and enjoy the show. Normally on the program, we talk a lot about companies that make a lot of money, companies that go out of their way to make money and don't mind stepping over ethical and occasionally legal bounds to do it. Companies like Microsoft and Disney and AOL who prey on people that are unknowledgeable or unfamiliar to make a buck. And while they may look at it themselves as we're doing a service for grandma and the internet ignorant or whatever, let's face it, these guys really aren't helping anybody out, you know. These are the companies like Microsoft who give so much XP exposure that I'm surprised there's not a Windows XP Happy Meal at McDonald's, complete with pull string Bill Gates saying, "Buy a Windows XP, why buy Windows XP?" Yeah, when you pull the string and, little cutout tips, XP tips on the back of the Happy Meal box, or, Ed Eisner paying off his secret police in Disney dollars, for his site. Anyway, but this month I wanted to kind of take a little sideways tour on something that's out of the norm, and that is companies that seem to not want to make money. It doesn't seem, no matter what some companies do, it occurs to me that there are still companies that don't want to make money. They go out of their way to make you uncomfortable and not want to shop there. Fry's Electronics is a company that I don't understand how they stay in business. Even the employees don't like working there. They don't like the store policies. Then we've got the incident that happened to Brian and myself. This is a great story. One of the few stories that won't get cut out because it has to do with Brian, so of course he's not going to cut the story out. But Brian was down here for Classic Gaming Expo. We were going to hook up the computers and make sure that we had all of our stuff together, and I'm glad we did. We really needed the extra time to get the show set up. And Brian decided that he wanted a Sega Nomad. So we decided to go on a quest to see if we could buy him a Sega Nomad here in Phoenix. Well, eventually we managed to secure him one. Probably paid too much. Nomad wasn't in the greatest shape, but he got the Nomad. So we decided we were going to go hunting for Genesis cartridges. Now, Genesis cartridges is something that nobody can have enough of, especially if you've got a Nomad. So we went around and we learned that there's a big underground network of classic game cartridges and consoles. And basically, you go into one of these stores, that have Xbox and PS2 all over their signs on the front. You go in there and you say, hey, show me the stuff. And they whip out this, Men in Black 2 style. They whip out this secret door, and all these cartridges come rolling over. It's not that bad, but, you got to kind of ask around, And we went to one place, and they said, well, have you tried Games Plus? Well, we didn't know they sold Genesis. Yeah, go over there. They got a bunch of Genesis stuff. So we started making the rounds. And our rounds ended up getting us to Funko Land. Now, I'm sure we all know about Funko Land. Now, this particular Funko Land is located in Southwest Phoenix. So This is for all of you Phoenix residents as your warning not to go shopping for classic gaming cartridges over there. Myself and Brian go to this Funko Land, and of course they have this big bin of Sega Genesis cartridges out on the floor, and we're thinking payday, right? So we're flipping through all the cartridges, and of course the only things that are out there, like John Madden, Umpty Squat this, and basically all the sports games you were tired of before they even came out. And Brian and myself are going, wow, this is kind of a bust. Well, then we spot like shelves of Genesis cartridges behind the counter. Now, before I go further, I want to bring this to your attention because it could be important. Now, you know my producer, Brian Smith. You've seen pictures. He's this little short black guy, often mistaken for Gary Coleman. Like that'll make the show. Anyway, and we were dressed in casuals. We didn't come in a suit and tie. Okay, we came in street clothes. So we went up to the counter, and it's like, hey, those are Genesis cartridges back there, aren't they? And the guy behind the counter, he's kind of uptight. You can kind of tell. He was one of those kind of corporate types that are just way too concerned about stuff. And his assistant was a gal. She was down unloading cartridges or something out of a box, and she seemed a little more happy-go-lucky, but you could definitely tell who was in charge when you first started talking to him. And he's like, yeah. It's like, great. Can we, come around back and take a look? We're interested in, buying a bunch of Sega cartridges. No. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's good. Can we come back now? No. Well, we want to see the cartridges. We want to buy some Sega cartridges. Well, what kind of games are you looking for? Well, I don't know. We're browsing. We're window shopping. We don't know what all's out there for Genesis, and we want to just kind of poke through them. We'd like to take a look. No. And it readily became apparent that this guy didn't want to sell us any Genesis cartridges. Now, understand, folks, it's not like this store was teeming with kids lining up to spend $80 on an Xbox game. The store was empty. And it's like, well, can you take a handful of them off the shelf and put them down here and just let us look through them? No, I can't do that. Well, do you got a list? How about a list? You got a list of what's up there? No. Will you read us off the titles? We want to buy cartridges. We've got money and we want to spend it. And the guy's like, well, I can't really help you out unless you know what you want. I mean, I was stunned. Brian finally just point blank said, we want to spend money here. Let us see the cartridges. And the guy just pretended he didn't hear anything. Finally I looked up and managed to, I leaned over the counter until I thought he was going to bitch slap me. And I finally saw Miss Pac-Man, so I said, I'll take that Miss Pac-Man up there. And it's like, we were putting the guy out. These weren't, you'd think, oh yeah, well he's only selling them for $1 or $2, so what's it worth his time? Hell no, these were like $5 to $12 cartridges, because, a lot of them weren't common, and it's Funko Land, so you're going to pay double the price anyway. And the guy looked like he went out of his way. And Brian and I were looking at each other, and we're basically saying, what the hell's going on? He's like, well, we can't keep all the good cartridges out on the floor. They get stolen. You see the area that we're in here. Basically insinuating that Brian and I were going to rob them blind if he put the cartridges anywhere near our grasp. I was pretty insulted. And I wasn't even the black guy in the room, and I was insulted. I can imagine what Brian felt. So we bought our stuff. We almost didn't buy anything, but, what do you do? So we bought a couple things, and we left. I looked over at Brian, I'm like, what in the hell was that? He said, it's a black thing. I'm like, no, come on, that can't have no black thing. He was just a dick. He didn't want to sell us any cartridges. And he's like, no, I've seen it before. It's a black thing. I said, I don't get it. I don't get it. He could have made sales. And it occurred to me that, this isn't the first time that I've gone to a store, and had people basically not want to sell me anything. And I don't understand. This is your job. This is what you do. You sell cartridges. I don't understand why you're bending over backwards to hook me up. Then I started thinking about it, and Brian and I started talking about it. And, Funko Land and Fry's, you get a feeling, hey, for minimum wage, they really don't give a rat's butt whether or not you get a Ms. Pat cartridge. But when you start talking about selling software, something that you're trying to make your bread and butter, and you're trying to break into the group, You're trying to break in to the marketplace. Now, there's a product. I'm very, very thrilled about the product. It's a file manager utility. It's one of those things that replaces Windows Explorer. It's the sort of thing that nobody believes that they need. Nobody thinks they need a file manager until they've had one for about a week. Then they can't live without one. They don't understand how they use the crappy old Windows Explorer for so long. And this program actually does a lot more than just browse your directories. It views pictures like AC/DC does. It has a built-in FTP client. It's got a huge, massive, cool search utility that lets you do all these cool Boolean expressions for searches. I mean, it's better than anything I've ever seen. It's got mass rename utilities built into it. Overall, it's a real quality product. And it hailed from another computer platform, the Amiga platform. And when they brought it over, they brought all this great programming knowledge with them, the power and performance and small, tight code and complete configurability and all the sort of things that you've always wanted in a utility. So I heard about it. I went over and I grabbed the demo, and I wrote to him and said, look, I get there's a lot of people who respect my opinion in the software market, and if you're interested in providing me a license, I'll do a really nice write-up. I'll post a fair journalistic write-up on it and review, and you can post it on your site. Quote me, do whatever you want. Providing the review's favorable, and we'll go from there. And they said, well, sure, we'll send you a press number so I could be all nice and registered and stuff. And I went through and I wrote them a nice review, and I was really excited. It was to the point to where, this is the sort of software you get excited about and you want to share with everybody. Legally, of course. You want them to go buy a copy, not share it with them. You can love your dog, just don't love your dog. See if anybody gets that reference. Anyway, so I went ahead and I started going through it, and then I realized what they were asking for the product. $80. That's 80 American US dollars. And it's like, whoa, okay, I think I found the first problem with your marketing system here. Basically, your shareware. You download a copy, you purchase it online, they give you a code, and you enter it. To me, that's shareware. Whether or not you can buy a copy of the box online, to me that still represents shareware. And I said, dudes, look, I know a ton of people that would buy this tomorrow if it was $39. Probably even more so if it was $29. I said, your nearest competitor is $19.95, okay? You're asking somebody to pay $80 for something that they can get comparable for $20. And they're like, well, it's selling. We're selling it. People are buying it. It's like, yeah, but are you selling like one a day, or are you selling like 50 a day? At $80, that's not an impulse buy anymore. That's save up your money for a month or two, and then still, you might still spend the money before you get around to registering something like this, right? And it's not that they don't give you a good evaluation period. I mean, they give you like 60 days, no nags, nothing, crippled. It's the full meal. And it's like, yeah, you guys are given a generous evaluation period, but you're asking these guys to part with $80. And they're like, well, it's worth $80. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm not disputing that fact. Let's say it's worth $80 because, folks, this program is so configurable. No matter what about the program you don't like, you can change it. Remove it, change it, put it somewhere else. It's fully skinnable. It's fully customizable. And as they say, it is loaded with features. It ain't an $80 program. There's very little software that's worth $80. I mean, I don't even want to buy Office or something like that for $80. That's a lot of cash, especially for an impulse buy. And I said, look, you guys are trying to go against the grain here. One, people don't know that they need a file manager. Two, they don't want a file manager because they think it's something that they don't need. They don't want it. So not only are you trying to convince them to buy something that costs too much, you're trying to get them to buy something that they don't think that they need that costs too much. Right? Are you following me here? Is this working with you? And they're like, well, it takes the place of 5 programs, and each of those programs are at least $40. They're getting a good deal. That's $200 value. Wait a minute, is that right? Math's never been my strong subject. But it's this much of a value, and we're giving it to them for $80. And I said, you don't get it. People don't need an integrated picture viewer. Okay, they've got something that they like, be it ACDC or one of the other free packages. I mean, there's tons of viewers out there. You're not going to give value add for something that people already have a monogamous relationship with another product. Well, it's got an FTP client. Well, again, people like what they're using. Everyone's got an FTP client they like, they use, and they're not going to go to yours. You're selling them a file manager. It's just that simple, right? Well, that didn't faze them at all. It's like, well, it's still worth $80, and we're going to charge $80 for it. I said, okay, listen, help us out here. Make an upgrade path. If you own ACDC, if you own WSFTP or Qt FTP, if you own one of these other products, provide proof that you own the product. We will give it to you. We will give you this product of ours for $40. Upgrade your product. Go with that route. I mean, it doesn't reduce the innate value of your product. You're not saying, well, it's obviously not worth $80, so we're going to charge $40. No, you still keep the value of an $80 package. You see where I'm going with this? And again, they're like, well, no, that would be too complicated, too much work, we don't really want to do that. And it's like, you guys got to do something. You've got a bunch of diehard Amiga heads following you over to the PC. When this small population is done purchasing your product, you're going to need business. You're going to need the PC market, and the PC market doesn't think they need a file manager. Of course, I couldn't get through to them. I couldn't get through to them what I was talking about, And so I was like, I'm desperate to try to figure out a way because I want to see this program grow. So I started looking for a community. This thing is configurable, skinnable. You can change the toolbars. You can save the toolbars. I'm thinking there's got to be a big-ass community out there of skins, sort of like what Winamp has or Neoplanet had all these skins and all this configuration stuff because I didn't want to configure this stuff on my own. I'm lazy. So I went looking for a community. There isn't one. There's some sort of a news site, and that's it. And I'm like, wow, there's no community. Not only are they asking them to pay $80, but there's no community. You go to their support page, and it's like, there was like nothing there. There's a mailing list, and by the way, that's like the golden secret of this product is this private mailing list. But the only way you can get on the mailing list is to buy the product. And I write to them, and I'm like, guys, listen. This mailing list is where all the goodies are at. This is where the community's hanging out. You guys got to open this up. If people want to know what they're getting for $80, if they knew they were getting this community as part of that $80 endeavor, you might be able to, get a few more registrations for such a high-priced product. And they're like, no, that's value add. We don't want the general public having access to that because that's something you get when you register, and we just don't, think that the non-paying users should have access to it. I'm barking up a hard wall here. And you guys know me. When I get excited about a product, I want to tell everybody about it. And this was really getting discouraging. I'm thinking, these guys are going to be gone in a year because they will not budge and they're not listening to anything that their people are talking about. And I said, look, all right, I will build you a community for free. I've got code sitting around. I've basically built communities for Blitz Basic. I've built communities for Pure Basic. I've built communities for other products. I've got this code laying around. It'd take me a few hours to modify it. You and I could talk about it. And I said, all you have to do is endorse it. I'll give you the code. You can put it up on your server. And basically, I'll let you have it. I'll give it to you. I'll sign it over, free of charge. I want to see a community of users for this product. And, you can't give away stuff to some people. Oh, no, we've already got some guy doing it. It's like, oh, you mean that news site? There's nothing there. There's no skin archive. There's no trading of toolbars or button configurations or anything. There's nothing there. It's like a news site. Well, he's working on it. We want to give him time to do something with it. And I'm like, listen, you guys are killing me here. I'm really going out on a limb to try to help you out. And we couldn't do it. I mean, they basically turned down every possibility that I offered to them, even if I was willing to give my time away for free. And don't think that this is unique, folks. This product is just one of many. Pure Basic. I went out to Pure Basic to see what sort of community that they had, because I wanted to download code samples. I wanted help. I wanted a command reference. I wanted up-to-date documentation. I paid my $60. I want support. So I went out and looked at what Pure Basic had to offer in terms of support and community and message boards and stuff like that. They had a message board, and they had, the beginnings of a community. But, you couldn't exchange code samples. You couldn't comment on code. There was no command lookup references. I mean, I'd gotten really spoiled after building the Blitz Basic community because I had written everything into it that I had ever wanted, and I did it for free. I went to the Pure Basic folks and I said, look, I'm going to build hopefully what's the ultimate site for Pure Basic users. You're going to be able to showcase your products. You're going to be able to comment and correct commands that are in the documentation. I'm going to go out of my way for free, for nothing, to build this big community for you guys to enjoy. And heaven forbid you think I had pissed on everybody's grave. Oh, how can you say ultimate? There's sites out there now doing this stuff, and you had no right to come in and say that. It's like, guys, I don't understand. I'm going to build you something for free. I'm not asking anything of you guys. I want your input so I can make it better for you. I want your help. I want to help you. And I just got attacked left and right. I couldn't believe it. I ended up building the community anyway. Trying to make a difference, because again, this was another product that had so much potential. It's not really it's not a games programming language, folks. It's for apps. But with just a little bit of work, it could easily write games with it too. So I tried to help out again. Once again, kind of the door slammed in my face. And again, these companies aren't unique. Anywhere you go, this stuff happens. You've got companies like Windows, that Linux Windows thing, charging for betas. And you thought only Microsoft got away with that, right? 1.0 Microsoft equals beta, right? You thought Microsoft was the only one to get away with that. Windows got away with charging for betas. Companies get away for charging for necessary upgrades. Their own product has so many problems with it. They release a bunch of patches and they charge you for it. It's like, whoa. I bought your product and it had these problems with it. Now you're going to charge me to fix it? We're not talking about enhanced features here. We're talking about bug fixes. Brian was a big click and play guy in Multimedia Fusion and a bunch of the other Click Team products. And Click Team was promising this fix, this upgrade patch thing that would fix all of these problems that they had. And they were talking about it, and it didn't come, and it didn't come, and it didn't come, and then it came, and it was like $40. It's like, come on, have a little bit of, if you don't want us to have the new features, give us a bug fix. Give us the bug fixes at least. That's not too much to ask. It's just crazy. And the more I go around, and the more I start looking at companies and software out on the net, it's getting more and more to the point to where people just act like they don't want your money. We want you to give us $80, but we're not going to give you a community that you can exchange. We're going to make this thing so skinnable and configurable, we're not going to give you any configurations or skins to use with it. We're not even going to give the community a chance to use it. We're not even going to fix our bug patches. It's just like when I was talking about Electronic Arts charging for Madden 2K whatever. In my days, those were called team discs, okay? You paid $40 for a program, and every year they would release a new roster of teams, bug fixes and tweaks to the AI, and they'd sell it to you for a $10 upgrade disc. You put the upgrade disc in, now you've got Earl Weaver 87 or whatever, and it had all the new teams, it had all the bug fixes. That's a team disc. That's an expansion pack. That's not pay $50 this year and then pay $50 next year. I don't understand how companies like that make money, but they do. And unfortunately, it seems to be getting more and more the norm to get away with doing that. So I've ranted long enough for this show. There's way too many other things for us to get to, so I'm going to close up this rant on companies that don't seem to want to make money. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're proud to present part 2 of the great David Crane interview taken at Classic Gaming Expo 2002. Before we start the interview, I'd like to comment on a couple of items that have popped up on our message forums, which we do have now. I'm not sure if a lot of you know that we do have message forums for you guys to come and sound off on. But we've had a couple of comments about the show, and I'd like to take a moment to address them on the air personally. There's been a couple of things that have sprung out over the course of the last month since our first show, kind of our new format, because we are going to be having a lot of interviews this year. The first comment, of course, was on the length of the show, and we knew that that was going to come to pass, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it from this show being long as well. There really isn't a methodology to the show in terms of time. We try to keep the show right around an hour to keep the downloads small and to allow, kind of keep our host from getting too overly taxed, because these big shows are pretty big, especially for those of you who are still on dial-up. We understand that, but at the same time, we don't want to remove parts of the show that we feel are important, and we don't want to limit you. We don't want to string the David Crane interview out for 3 weeks, or 3 months rather. We're not interested in doing that. We're not going to record extra editions of the show during the month. We don't want to get in that habit. One of the biggest problems that we had in the beginning was people didn't know when the show was coming out. People would pop on IRC, well, when's the new show coming out? When's the new show going to come out? We haven't seen a show in a while. When's the next show going to come out? So Brian and myself said the first of the month, every month, there will be the show. We're not going to release any extra shows because people miss them. They don't come to the site and check it out. They come in a month and go, hey, man, I missed your show. And it's like, well, come on, guys. It's every month on the first of the month. We may be a day late, maybe 2, depending, if somebody gets sick or something. But if you know that it's always at the first of the month, and we don't sneak a show in edgewise on you, it's good for everybody. So, that's why we didn't release an extra show, and we didn't release, multiple parts of this show. It just made good sense to break the interview up into a couple of chunks. We could have easily trimmed that interview down to an hour and made the whole show, a 1-hour interview with David Crane. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to give you as much of the goodies as we could, so we split it into 2 parts. That's kind of funny, too. There's no way we could have brought you the entire interview in a single part. People said, well, it really sucks that, you tricked us and we have to listen to 2 shows. It's like, well, I hope you're not just listening to the show for the interviews, folks, because that's not really what Retro Radio is about. The interviews are a great addition to the show. But the interviews themselves are supporting, or do support, the rest of the show, which is about our insights and our feelings about gaming, the classic gaming, and what the modern games are doing wrong. And a lot of times, the questions we ask in the interview directly relate to topics that we've covered. We purposefully integrate our content together. The show is not based on segments. We try to break it up and give it some sort of a format, but it's not a segment-based show. I mean, it's not like a serial where you can listen to just one part of the show every month and get something out of it. It just doesn't work that way. And the other thing that we got, which, this is kind of insulting to me, but I'm gonna deal with this in the manner that I dealt with it up on the message boards. People basically want us to carve the interviews out of the show and put those up for download so they don't have to download the rest of the show. We just want the interview. We don't want to listen to the rest of your crap. Well, I'm sorry. The rest of this crap is the show, okay? The interview is just a goodie. That's just a part of the show. Okay? I'm sorry if you're not interested in the rest of the show. Maybe you should go read about a David Crane interview they posted on Slashdot a couple weeks ago. We asked David Crane very specific questions about our feelings about classic gaming. Yeah, sure, some of it was general purpose information. About how Pitfall was made. That's of interest to everybody. But especially in the second segment, you're going to hear a lot of stuff from the interview that deals specifically about what we talk about here on Retro Gaming Radio. These interviewers these interviews, viewees, I guess, would be the proper tense there. These interviewees come to us because we represent something that they believe in. Okay? If all this was an interview show, we wouldn't have the kind of integrity, we wouldn't have the kind of content that brings people to us. Okay? We are not interested in being a turnkey news magazine, okay? If you want to read canned, cut and dry, boring interviews with celebrities of the classic gaming industry, there are plenty of magazines that'll cover that for you. What makes this show work, and what makes our interviews work, and what makes the show as a whole work together is the fact that we have different pieces of content that all work together, okay? We're not going to separate the interviews out for you folks, okay? That would completely ruin why we made this show. We didn't make this show to bring you interviews. We made this show to make a difference in the gaming community. Through interviews, we can get these people to say, yeah, you know what, Shane? You're completely right. Engine whoring sucks. And every time a cool game comes out, there's 1,000 knockoffs and it hurts the industry. Okay? If I get somebody with some credibility on the show to say that, it supports what I have told you over and over again on the show about how the classic gaming industry could affect the modern industry. Where's the modern gaming industry going wrong? You know, these are the sort of things that these all work together. You know, somebody suggested, well, how about a transcript? Well, I'm not going to get somebody to type out a transcript. Part of the magic of retro gaming radio is the audio. You know, part of it is hearing David Crane chuckling, hearing everybody in the background laughing when Brian cracks a joke about, you know, David Crane's video games. It's all part of the magic, and you can't get that reading a transcript. I'm sorry if you're on dial-up, okay? I am so sorry you're on dial-up. I can't help you, okay? I can't cut a smaller edition of the show. I can't maintain 3 editions of the show. I'm not going to tax somebody to write up transcripts when transcripts usually end up being hoarded out to other places. You know, basically there is some sort of an integrity to the show that I want to keep. Okay? This isn't just for you guys. This is for us. Okay? And part of what we're doing here, we don't get paid for this, okay? Maybe somebody has some misconceptions that somehow we've got a government grant to run this show. Not true. Okay? We go out of pocket to bring you this show. We buy product. We spend money on booths and equipment to bring you this stuff. We don't get paid for it. Yeah, I sell archive CDs, but let me tell you something, folks. The archive CDs are basically non-profit. All right? I do it as a service to people who don't have high bandwidth. For you dial-up people, that's the service I provide to you. You know, to get you the shows that you can listen to. We don't make a dime, all right? And, you know, basically saying, you know what, we just want to hear the interviews. We don't want to hear you. Okay? Well, I'm sorry. You don't buy the sports section of a newspaper, okay? You may not read the news and the business part of the newspaper. Maybe you buy USA Today and take the sports section out and throw the rest of the paper away. But you got to buy the whole paper. You can't just buy the sports section. All right, and the reason is, you know, they've got a message to convey. They've got advertisers. We don't have advertisers, but in a sense we do, because we have interviewees and we have people who are evaluating us, saying, "Hey, are you guys big enough for us to send you product to review?" I can't afford to buy every product that comes out. If somebody says, "Hey, you know, Retro Gaming Radio, you guys got like 5,000 listeners. That's great. Here's a couple of titles that you could review on the show." That's how it works, okay? If you listen to just the interviews and carve out the product reviews and everything else that makes the show work, you know, you're biting the hand that feeds you, okay? I'm not going to continue to beat this to a dead horse. If you're interested in more explanation, where I've even carried on longer than I've carried on here, check the message forums and you'll see the responses and the people who mostly agree with this. You know, the people on dial-up, it's hard for them to agree with this, but the rest of the people seem to have a pretty firm grip on why the show doesn't work if you just get interviews. Okay? So with that being said, I'd like to go ahead and start the David Crane Part 2 interview. This is like my favorite part, and wait till you guys hear this. This is great stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you David Crane at the Classic Gaming Expo 2002.
Right. And you always have the trade-off. If you spend all your time, effort, and memory on pretty pictures, you don't have a fun game. I don't want to get you started because I know that's what you feel about consoles today. But the Amiga, people would come to me and they'd say, "This is so fabulous. This high-resolution mode where we can do all these colors is so wonderful." It's not much better than VGA right now. I mean, you know, it's VGA. But they would say, "There's wonderful colors." And I said, "Yes, that's true. How many of those pictures will fit on a single floppy disk," which is what was being used for the software at that time?
Right.
3.5. All right, so you could have a game with 3.5 pictures in it if you wanted that beautiful mode. So we weren't actually able to use the great capabilities of the Amiga early on when you had a 3.5-inch floppy disk, or as the distribution medium.
Well, yeah, and not everybody has somebody like Jim Socks or something on their team that has such brilliant artwork. Defender of the Crown on 2 floppy disks was, that's what sold the Amiga. Let's face it, in the United States, Defender of the Crown sold the Amiga. I bought an Amiga to play Defender of the Crown on it. But there were so many things that came, I guess, and again, because of the U.S. market, you probably just it wasn't economically feasible. But what they exploited in that box, 5 years down the road, they came up with an even more impressive banter of hardware hacks and tricks.
Oh, yeah.
It was just phenomenal. I mean, it just seems like you're such a...
Oh, I own one. In fact...
Oh, you still have one?
I used it to develop 2600 games on.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, see, there's story time. Storytime theater is on. Really? And how did you do that? Was there an emulator, basically, at that time?
No, I needed to have a 6502 cross-assembler, and I needed a place to do that. And... the Amiga actually showed up in recording studios, video recording studios.
Right.
Because it could be gen-locked.
Yes, gen-locked made the Amiga.
All the different things that it could do. So there were a lot of uses for it, and I had one for that very purpose.
Interesting. Let's see. I thought I had something else on Ghostbusters. That's a brilliant game. I mean, I don't know how many times I've played that game. I guess you can only hear how many times how great he is, huh? Then it gets old.
Well, I have to tell you that you haven't mentioned what the disappointment that I had with Ghostbusters, which was by the time I had the game pretty well done, it had to go out because it had to make Christmas. Remember, this was absolutely a very, very tight schedule, and so you win the entire game. You do this whole thing. You do all this before the keymaster and the gatekeeper get to Zool or whatever it is. You do all this stuff, and you cross the streams. And you expect this great reward, and there was no time to do anything but one screen, one picture, and I have to apologize for that, but schedule was the schedule.
Well, to the new generation, that's nothing new. I mean, I played Diablo 2 for like 60 hours, and it got to the end. Like you said, I was expecting, there was no way they could have ever met the expectation after 60 hours of my life were gone. I mean, something had to happen. I wanted to see a big demon head come out of the ground. I wanted to see anything, and it comes up on the screen and says, you win.
You win, yeah.
I wanted to just throw that disc across. I mean, I was just dying.
But you got to understand that there's...
It was a 64.
No, I'm just saying in general with a video game design. I mean, you have deadlines, and you have limited budgets. And you really want to put that budget where the gameplay is. You don't want to be spending a lot of time on just one fluff screen. Otherwise, we'd all be doing...
Xbox games.
Not Xbox games.
Oh, we were all doing Final Fantasy.
No, I was going to say we'd all be doing full motion video games.
Ooh. Sega CDs.
Sega CDs.
Okay.
There was a period in the video game business where FMVs were required just for people to pay attention to the game.
True.
So you had to waste all this time on hiring actors, and you had them setting up the plot of sending out the X-15s and, all the things that they would do. Then you get to make a video game.
Right. Yeah. Now it's multicolored volumetric font.
Yeah.
You can have a game without volumetric font.
We asked Gary, so we're going to ask you, do you go home at night and do those side projects? Because Gary said he does. Do you do the same thing?
Side projects?
Yeah, like...
He says he doesn't have much time because he's a manager now and he doesn't really have time to code, but when he goes home, a couple hours a night, maybe tinker a little personal project. You still do that?
I code all the time.
Oh, so you're a full-time coder?
All I do.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's a whole different story then.
Okay.
That's cool.
I mean, there have been people over the years who stopped doing it and started managing the process and such. And in many cases, the Peter Principle applies. Peter Principle is that in business, a man rises to his level of incompetence. Because it's deadly serious. You're good at a job, so you get promoted.
Right. Okay. Eventually they promote you out of the job.
Eventually they promote you into a job you're not good at anymore.
Exactly.
So you literally rise to the level of incompetence. And if, people who are good at doing video games ought to do video games, and that's what I do. I've been doing it for 30 years.
How do you feel about engine reuse? We know you guys don't do it.
Well, I don't do it because I can write code faster than I can talk. And so I might as well write the code fresh.
Sure.
Okay? But it's an absolute must in projects that have 20 people over a year, working on a project. You can't reinvent the wheel every single time. So if you can write engines, at least, that are very general purpose, that can be retasked more easily than writing them from scratch, then by all means, they've got to do it. I've just never exactly been able to. I mean, I do it. I pull out a piece of code from a game that I did before. I mean, if I need a gravity routine, gravity I can write faster than I can find the old file.
Right.
But there's a lot of things that I spent a lot of time tweaking something. So I said, what game was that I did that on? I go back to the old source, pop it out, do something. So reusing source is something.
Well, that's one thing, but basically taking Quake and adding new levels and putting a tag on it and saying it's a whole new game.
Well, that's not engine retasking. That's game retasking. I mean, you see that I could reuse an engine in 2 games and you wouldn't know that it's in there.
Right, but we don't have a problem at all with that.
Right.
Our problem is when they take an engine and don't do anything new with it. I mean, basically, the game never evolves. Do you feel that engine reuse like that tends to limit or puts blinders on what you end up doing at the end of the project with it?
Well, you're asking that question with an answer in mind. You've already made your decision on how
I'm
you
curious
feel
what
about
your
that.
opinion is.
And I will say that empirically, you obviously have situations where you can point to that says, this did not advance the medium, it may have even retarded it.
Right.
But the fact is, engine reuse is a perfect opportunity to advance the medium. Let's use an example of gameplay. Asteroids came out. Well, it was the first time we had to learn how to use several fingers to rotate and fly and all this kind of stuff. We used those techniques.
Right.
And then Defender came out. Now, Defender, you didn't rotate, you moved up and down, and you shot.
Right.
Well, Defender, you watch somebody who'd never played Asteroids try to pick up Defender. They couldn't.
Right.
They really couldn't do it. And then Stargate, if you hadn't maxed Defender, you couldn't even play Stargate.
Right.
As the games came out in the arcades, they were presupposing that you had played all the previous versions so that they could move things along.
Right.
So that's the good way to do that.
Right.
Use the fact that you have a knowledgeable player base to move into some new gameplay or to do something different or better or faster or whatever. And sequels can do the same thing. They don't have to be bad, whether it's a movie sequel, a book sequel, or a video game sequel.
Agreed.
If what you take advantage of is the fact you've already done all your character development, so now you can do all plot.
Right. I certainly don't have a problem with that. I mean, to be able, that's why I read book series and not standalone books. Or miniseries on television always seem to turn out better than a 2-hour movie. They have more time to do that.
To do the development of the story.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the characters. There's no more need to get in with that.
But when you sit there and you see, you do a story, and then you see your next door neighbor do your exact same story, but the graphics look a lot better. And then your next door neighbor after that has done your story and his story, but the graphics are just looking better. When do you draw the line?
I'm going to defend that practice because of the amount of money it takes to develop a video game these days. Okay. Basically, go back in time. If you ask somebody, and I mentioned this earlier, you ask somebody what kind of games do you like, they're going to look at their favorite game. They're going to tell you that's what they like.
Right.
Well, if you're going to invest $15, $20 million in something, you've got to go to investors and say, what was that movie, The Players, about Hollywood, where they would say, okay, it's a Driving Miss Daisy meets the Terminator, and we see Tom Hanks as the kid. That's how they talk about movies, to explain that to the investor. Otherwise, the investor can't get their mind around what this is going to be. So, yes, there's market research. What kind of games do you like? Well, I love Quake. And so that the results of that survey is going to be another game like that. Now, in the early days of Activision, I prided myself on doing the next generation. When everybody was playing space games, I'd do a sports game. When everybody was doing sports games, I'd move on, to do something else. But the primary reason I did that is because I was making my own decisions. I wasn't doing market research, and I was sick and tired of space games.
Right.
Exactly.
And I was going to have to spend the next year of my life developing this game. I was going to do something that would be fun for me. But nowadays, it's not that way. It's not one person making a decision. There's market research. There's raising money. It's a horrendous task out there to do these large console games. And to do something truly unique takes a vision that not a lot of people are willing to spend $15-20 million on just to see, let's see what it comes out like.
But can't you apply the process? This is an example I talked to Gary about. The Quake 2 engine, been used over and over and over again, millions of times, let's say hundreds of times, which is probably more accurate. Half-Life was made on it. Half-Life almost changed the genre, but not quite. Close, but not quite. Now, I ran across something on some little site out of nowhere. This guy wasn't even selling the game, I don't think. He was giving it away. Probably had to. He had taken the Quake 2 engine and made a water slide simulator out of it. You had these cute little panda bears, little chickens and rabbits, and you raced down water slides. That's brilliant. The guy didn't have to do a lot of work with that. I mean, he had the engine done for him. Why can't they apply the cost savings and move along? I mean, like you said, there's got to be a solution out there. I mean, it seems to be a horrible cloning process that, understanding, let's take the financial portion out of it, we can use the same engine. Who's making the decisions to make that happen, do you think?
Because what I'm saying is you can't take the financial portion out of it. New games, truly innovative games, come along every year. Those are being done by small development houses who are risking their mortgages. They are literally risking their livelihoods because they know it's going to turn. They can picture what it's going to be. Right. They know how to play games. They know what it's going to be. And they turn out something new. And then don't be surprised if 10 clones come out of it next year because it was successful. So as an avid gamer, ignore the 10 clones. Concentrate on the originals. You have to watch for them. You have to pick and choose to find them. But there's average players out there who don't know the difference, who don't care that it's the same as what. They paid their money, they got their $50 worth or whatever. Once they feel like they got an entertainment value out of it, that's them. They're not the hardcore gamers. So you really just have to pick and choose, and people are doing creative work.
Well, they're on creative work. It's just very hard to find. They have great visions.
It is hard to find, but that's just the business, the way it is.
So is this the whole problem that it's a money business? We just need to learn to accept that it's money now. Is that David Crane's theory of video game revolution?
Ka-ching is my new quote.
Yeah.
No.
That's now be your new email tagline.
David Crane at ka-ching.com?
That's wrong.
What I'm pointing out is there is a business. And if there wasn't a business, there wouldn't be opportunities for the small houses to create all the new unique stuff. Okay. So you can actually be real pessimistic about it and say 9 out of 10 games are crap out there, but they appeal to the masses, they make a business, they make people willing to invest, they make it so that there is a business, and so that 1 in 10 can happen. That's the optimistic way to look at it.
That's fair.
It just seems like that number just keeps going up. It used to be there was like one bad game. When you go buy an Atari cartridge, you might get that E.T.
Yeah.
You might get that. What was another bad one? That's the only bad cartridge I come up with. That's wrong. E.T.'s the only bad one I come up with. We're going to interview...
you probably got to include Texas Chainsaw Massacre in there.
Oh, well, okay, yeah. That was kind of wrong.
Or Lost Luggage.
Gremlins.
Lost Luggage.
I didn't play Lost Luggage. That's probably why.
That's probably why. It was not good.
Okay, so we'll move on. So after the 64 stuff, you went on to... What were you coding after, say, the 8-bit stuff?
Oh, I don't remember. When was that? That was right about 87 when I left Activision.
Why did all you guys leave Activision?
What's that?
Why did you guys leave Activision?
That's a great question. Good one, Brian.
That's an interesting question. Well, there was a coup. There was a power struggle where the board of directors kicked out my co-founder and president, Jim Levy. And it went downhill from there. They put the wrong guy in charge.
That's pretty much what Alan said, too.
Yeah.
Okay. That's got to be frustrating. I mean, how does it feel to have found something that was so great? I mean, let's be honest. Activision's still great. They do some very good stuff. But it's not old school Activision. It's not David Crane's Activision.
Yeah, it's not David Crane's Activision.
We're going to have to teach you guys some glass half full stuff here. All right, you can concentrate on the fact that Activision is a different company than it was before, but that completely eliminates enjoying what it was then.
That's why we're here. That's why we're here.
We had a fabulous time. We had a great run. Everything was wonderful. I mean, we had a time where we had so many overachievers in the company. You didn't hire anybody who couldn't do 7 jobs.
Right.
We had 65 million in sales with 60 employees.
Wow.
Damn.
Okay. I mean, everybody was working hard. Everybody was enjoying it, loving coming into work, that sort of thing.
It's really hard to be upset when you're making money hand over fist.
Yeah, that's
true.
true.
It's really to have the pessimistic attitude when you're thinking, I just made $10 million today. I can't really be mad.
Real quick, 2 more winners, John Cypher.
So yeah, okay. I can see that.
And if you look at the companies spawned by Activision, a couple of the guys from sales started Acclaim.
Right.
Alan Bob went and did Accolade. You just look around, there was someone from Activision at the forefront
of every
one of these companies out there.
Right. So you needed
Because
something
they
like
were
that
the
to happen.
cream, the absolute cream of the crop.
So you needed something like that to happen to spawn more excellent
right.
game companies. So that's
the optimistic approach. You're the most optimistic man I've ever met.
Yeah. Well, because he knows. We don't know.
We don't know.
We're learning now.
We are learning. We are learning from the masses.
I was there.
He was there. That was the important part.
This is all his fault.
So you left Activision. You are now at Skyworks.
Yes.
And Skyworks is basically, from all of our interviews, because these are all going to be split up, we got to go over the same ground here. Basically, you do branded internet games.
Yeah, Gary Kitchen and I got together in 1995, and we said, the internet looks like it's going to be big. Okay. Although, and a lot of people were saying that, but nobody could figure out how to make money at it.
Right.
But what we liked about it is we said, let's treat it as the next video game console. The internet. It's kind of like, who was that? Is that Sun, or who says the network is the computer, all that kind of stuff. Well, the internet is the game console. Again, looking at the internet as a video game platform, we said, a lot of people have modems. In fact, back then, nobody had broadband.
Right.
And a modem is going to require that whatever game you do on the internet is going to be small.
Right.
We looked at each other and said, hey, we know how to make small games.
That were good.
Yeah, we know how to make games that are, very efficiently use memory. And so we started doing that and found a company. Lifesavers was very progressive about that. The head of Lifesavers, she saw the internet was going to be something, it ought to be some advertising, so she took a tiny amount of money out of their advertising budget,
Yeah.
And we developed this idea where the advertiser, Fortune 100 company, comes to us, pays us to develop a game that goes online, either on their website or another website, that people play for free, and it has their branding in it. So, it's just messages, just like you see on the back wall of the football or the baseball stadium or whatever. They've got advertising messages. They don't get in your way. They don't make the game any less fun. And, it's not an interactive ad. It is a video game that stands alone all by itself, whether it's got ads in it or not. Right. And then it has advertising in it. And so we created this 3-way partnership, if you will, of the advertiser paying us. So we're getting paid whether you don't have to sell something.
Not, right? Yeah,
we're getting paid. All right. The user gets to play it for free, and the advertiser gets the user's eyeballs for sometimes hours. I mean, how long are you playing a video game? And it used to be compared to banner ads, which the thing about a banner ad is the most important thing about a banner ad is recognizing that it's a banner ad so you don't accidentally click on it.
Right. Or so you can ignore it or block it.
That's right. And instead, we give the people are having fun, so they're actually getting a positive experience from this brand experience. They're loving it,
Right.
So it's like a 3-way partnership, and the player wins, he gets to play games for free. The advertiser wins, they get his eyeballs. We win because we get paid what it costs to make it.
Works out for everybody.
A couple years later, somebody came up with a name for what we do, And you know that if anybody makes up a name for what you're doing well.
Right.
Okay.
There you go.
And that's when people started calling this advergaming.
Advergaming.
Advergaming. So, yeah, that's what we do. We've been doing it since 1995.
And I'm assuming it's lucrative since you're all still in business.
Yes, it's reasonably lucrative. It's, like I said, we figured out a business model that allows us to make money on the Internet without actually making money on the Internet.
Right. Which is that's exactly what everyone's been trying to do forever.
That's right.
That's a good thing. And your games, what is your development platform of choice?
We use Shockwave, which is interesting. Shockwave is one of those funny things. It happens a lot of times. It's like the 2600. All right, the 2600, again, through this accident of making the software do more than the hardware, it expanded the abilities dramatically. Well, Director was a product made by Macromedia.
I am very familiar with it.
Okay, and its primary job at that time was to make something slightly interactive. So you're doing a presentation, a CD-ROM presentation.
It's like PowerPoint with sprites.
And you have a button. You color form with sprites. Exactly. Click on this, you get to see the next page.
Right.
Okay. Very, very simple. But somebody back in the lab at Macromedia said, to make these buttons work, we ought to have a little scripting language. That scripting language was supposed to be if A, then B.
Right.
It was supposed to be something extremely simple.
Interactive branching.
And however they got away with it, whether their manager wasn't watching and didn't know what they were doing, they wrote a complete video game language.
Which is Lingo.
Which is Lingo.
You know, I got to interject something here. We both tried Lingo. I wanted to hang myself. Is there a secret to learning Lingo that we missed?
Well, I'm assuming after assembly and...
you know what, though? That's true. They were doing assembler, so Lingo must have been like being let out of prison.
I'm about to just like basic.
Okay.
Yeah, Lingo is very much like BASIC.
I
But
didn't
I
think it was
tell you,
enough like basic.
when we first started, you know, we bought a couple of the books of, you know, how to program games with Lingo, which was kind of funny that we would be reading those books. But
David Crane's How to Program Games with Lingo.
I would love to see a picture of that.
Oh.
well, we were looking to see if there were any tricks, and there really weren't at the time. And then we would do some of our games, and we've had the authors of those books come back to us and said, "Oh my God, you did a complete billiards game with 15 balls, cue ball, bouncing off the things, dropping. How the heck did you do that?" And it's
old school type programming.
Well, you know, it's that, and like I said, I can write program as fast as I can talk, which is pretty fast. And I've programmed video games in 19 different languages. I don't know. Assembly language for every machine as it comes out, for C, for BASIC, you know. You learn enough computer programming languages, and they're all the same.
Yeah.
The process is all the same.
The process is certainly all the same. All you have to learn is what is the instruction set and what does each instruction do. And then you try to put out of your mind all the others so that you don't accidentally use a command from...
I don't know how many times I've done that.
I've never done that
PHP
before.
code. I've done there, been there, done that. I still write Amos code in Blitz.
Oh, no.
I do. It's like, why doesn't this run? I'll tell this Amos code. That's crazy.
We found that Shockwave for Lingo was extremely capable. And it came out at the same time as Java, and everybody was thinking doing Java games. And there are things you can do in Java now, but it's not a graphical, music, multimedia, you know, a beautiful environment to work in.
Yeah, let's be honest, it wasn't really designed for gameplay in mind.
No.
Not at all. They kind of hacked that in where Shockwave, like you said, was pure media-based. Good start.
And we love it. And every year, Macromedia comes out with a new version. And it used to be they would make sure that our games would play on it first.
Wow, that's great.
Wow, then you know you got ownership.
Well, because you know that we're using programming tricks. Whatever the machine can do, we're going to do. And they have to make sure that they're backwards compatible with the tricks that might not have been intended in the first place. You know.
They become features.
So, but it's still, technically speaking, it's still a closed development environment. Would you say
Why
that's
true? Why would you say that?
Because you're at the whim of a plug-in. You cannot go and hit the hardware directly if you want to. You are talking through a plug-in.
Well, I don't think that is a closed development environment. I think of that as a tiered development environment. The biggest problem used to be performance, but now when a $400 PC is 1.9 gigahertz, we don't really have that problem.
Exactly.
But when I'm writing a game, I'm writing it in Lingo, which is an interpretive language,
Yes.
which is being interpreted by a plugin,
Correct.
which is working out of a browser, which is working under Windows, which is working under BIOS.
Right.
And so, yes, it's very tiered, and there's not a lot that you can do, but
It gets the job done.
it gets the job done.
Is it your favorite way of coding right now?
Well, that's a simple answer. My favorite way of coding is whatever
Whatever
I'm doing
putting it
right
in
now,
time.
because I have to have it my favorite.
You know, this is the most optimistic man I've ever met. If we put him in a room full of, like, horse dung, I swear he would be digging in there looking for the pony.
He's in there.
It's amazing to find people that are still like that.
David Crane's pony hunt.
I am.
Stop it, I can already see there's going to be a Shockwave Flash game of that somewhere pop up.
Thank you to
I'm
Retro
not
Game
at all.
Radio.
I'm not at all a particularly optimistic person. But if you do a project, or if you have a life which involves working thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, sometimes all night, when you come up to a deadline, you have to be able to forget the bad parts, or you'd never start the next one. If I remembered how bad it was last week when I was finishing that game, I would never start the next one.
Right.
True.
I'd be afraid of what would be happening. I'd know it's coming. Now, my wife, for years and years, has always said, why are you working all night the week before it's due? Just work an extra 5 minutes every day throughout the whole project.
He codes like me.
That'd work.
Why actually have time to do it when it's more fun to cram for it, right?
It's not that it's more fun. It's simply that you're trying to make the best product possible, and so it has to have the most features possible, and you know how many hours there are between now and deadline.
That's true.
And you'll use them all.
Yeah.
You'll use them all if you can keep your eyes open.
See, I don't think that's like the commonplace programming, though. I don't think it's that way, really, with everybody.
That's old school programming.
That's old school, but I don't think it's new school. I think the developers come in at 9 o'clock, they go home at 5.
And whatever works, and when Christmas comes, whatever works.
Yeah, whatever's ready for the Christmas release. That's exactly what the guy from, I can't say his name, or his company, we had a developer, we did a show on, basically that the developer wasn't developing anymore. He was reading off a manual, and he was doing off a design document. What he wanted had no bearing on what the final product ended up being. And, basically that publishers were dictating it's going to be what sold last year, if not too bad type resume. And, we laid it all out, and we had a developer write in from a company, a huge company, one of the biggest companies. So you only have like five realistically to pick from. And he said, it's not only as bad as you think it is, it's worse. He said, yesterday, my manager came to me. We are closing this project in 2 weeks. He says, you have 2 weeks to add multiplayer. I don't care if it's good or not. You will add multiplayer, and you have 2 weeks to do it.
Well,
I'd like to think that's not the norm, but apparently it's getting to be more the norm.
Well, one issue about old school, as you call it, is we used to produce products in ROM, semiconductor ROM. You did not rev your product.
Yeah, we had to write it right the first time then.
That's right. And so we spent tons more time bug testing. We spent tons more time checking for features. And I liked it that way for a lot of reasons. I mean, one is when you're done, you're done.
Right.
Like, you guys keep trying to hang over, Pitfall, and they're doing all these things with Pitfall, you should feel bad about it. When I was done with that game, I was done with the game. I moved on. I did another game, and another game, and another game, And
it was a job for you, but it was an experience for us. I guess that's really the difference in your perception and our perception.
I wouldn't describe it as just a job. My point is, I enjoyed the next game as much as Pitfall.
Right.
And if it had some technical challenge to it, it was even more fun.
So it's like a bunch of achievements. Your games are more achievements than actual.
Absolutely.
No coddling involved.
That's the whole idea. You have to look at it as a goal. I reached my goal. I'm done.
I'm done. Who cares if they?
Yeah, whatever happens after that. It's like
it's not.
It's like you built a car. I mean, if somebody goes and mods your car, you don't care. You built the car.
So you definitely prefer working. When I say closed, I mean if it runs on Shockwave on the Mac or the PC or wherever, it's going to run, and you don't have to worry about do they have X video card, do they have X sound card. You prefer to work in a more console-ish environment where if it's going to work on this box, it's going to work on every other box. Versus, say, Have you actually actively done like Win32 gaming as well? Written Win32 games?
No, and I sort of agree with what you're saying. I mean, I wouldn't want to have to spend half my time trying to figure out what their sound card was, that sort of thing. I prefer to have a standard. I mean, we loved the 2600 because we knew that everybody's machine was going to perform exactly the same way, so we could push it right to the limit. As it is now, even with a Shockwave game, there are times that you have to say, don't scroll that, because the guy with a 200 megahertz screen is not going to enjoy it. It's going to take too long. So you'll make decisions. You do have a wide range of performance capabilities, just basically with speed. And with hardware acceleration. Yeah. So, yeah, I'll make decisions along those lines, and occasionally, unhappily, have to make a least common denominator decision on a game.
That brings my next question. What do you guys at Skyworks consider the least? Because that's what everybody who writes games, including us, what do you deem as the lowest common denominator? What do you finally break off and say, look, if you don't have a P2 450, we'd love you to play our game, but sorry. What do you guys bring that up at?
We keep it very, very low.
Which is good.
There are a lot of competitors out there now who are trying to get into the advert gaming business, and they have systems that won't even start running without a hardware accelerator. Well, the problem, we have brand managers in Fortune 100 companies who have to play our games and say, yeah, I like it.
Right.
They're playing it, on a very low-end machine. They're playing it on their desk.
Right.
The machine that their corporation bought for them,
It's 5 years ago.
And I can't tell you exactly what the number is today. It changes every month.
Well, of course.
And we also, for people who submit games and they submit scores and such, we'll carry along with that data how fast their machine is so we can keep track of,
that makes sense.
What are our players,
Robotron running at half speed and getting a better score that way doesn't carry as much weight.
Well, it's not so much that issue. We write the games so that they will score the same no matter how fast your machine is.
That's cool.
It's hard, but it's...
I bet it is. I was just thinking to myself, damn, how would you do that?
Yeah. But, we pride ourselves on the fact that our games can be played on the lowest machine of anybody out there doing this kind of work. And we keep it that way.
Cool.
But that's still up now. I mean, I'm sure it's a 400 megahertz,
I was thinking of the P200.
Pentium, whatever. We used to use the 200 as our minimum, but I think it's gone up.
Okay. So you do keep that fairly dynamic then?
Yeah.
Do you actually work yourself on slower machines to try to keep that perspective?
Well, you might be amazed.
It's got the 486.
DX.
Yeah.
Most of us do our development on Mac.
Whoa. Really?
I thought you might be amazed.
Well, it makes sense with Macromedia.
Exactly.
Because that's like totally platformless.
The next keynote
No, more than that.
Bob Newman.
It was developed on the Mac. So the Mac version of Director is better.
It's native. It's native platform. It's not a port.
That's right.
Now, I know a lot of people that believe that Macs actually run faster, but they can't make any dollars, unless they're writing Shockwave.
Yeah. So yeah, I develop on an Apple laptop. It's only 400 megahertz, and if it'll run on that, it'll run on anything.
Well, we'd like to thank David Crane for being on the show. He was a really good sport, gave us tons and tons and tons of audio that we could use for the show. I think it really turned out nice, and we really appreciated all the work that he and his crew did for us. His PR person got a hold of us before the Classic Gaming Expo and arranged everything in advance so that we got a chance to talk to everybody from Skyworks, including... of course, Alan and Gary and David Crane here. Of course, we'll have those other interviews for you in the near future, so do stick around for those in future episodes. We really appreciate all the people at the Classic Gaming Expo that were nice enough to come over and give us an interview and spend the time with us. In some cases, they really went above and beyond the call of duty, and we really appreciated it. So thanks, David Crane and crew. We are thrilled to have you on the show. Well, folks, last episode I told you I would catch you up on the Act Labs light gun when I had a little more time, and I got a chance to play with the gun a little bit more. And, let me just give you a little follow-up review on what I've discovered. Not only were Act Labs nice enough to get back with me. They explained all the issues that I discussed on the last show, and I'd like to talk to you about those. First of all, the gun, they said, is lightweight on purpose. They could have made it heavier, and again, I had said in the last show that I thought it felt kind of a little cheap on the light side. You know, didn't feel as durable as it probably could have been. They said they kept it intentionally light. They said that during play testing that if it was a little heavier, that people can only play 10 or 15 minutes, so they basically did everything they could to keep the gun as light as possible. And again, you know, I've used it over the course of the last month, and it's held up to the test of time, so not too bad of a deal on that. The USB power issues. Now, one of the things that myself and my producer both were kind of uptight about was the fact that basically if you don't plug it into the root hub of your USB ports, the gun doesn't work right. And because the VGA cord is so short, basically you have no choice but to use one of your precious USB connectors on the back. Now I was informed by the Act Labs engineers that the light gun requires a tremendous amount of power. And a certified USB hub, an external USB hub, a self-powered USB hub with some juice would indeed make the gun operate properly. That still doesn't change the fact that with the USB cable being 4 inches long, you just can't move that box anywhere where there might be a hub, where you would use a hub like in front of your computer. So that, you know, they explain their purpose, but it doesn't really change the fact that you're going to plug it into the VGA port on the back of your computer, and you're going to use a root USB plug. So just assume that's the case and make concessions around it if you plan on purchasing this gun. I was informed that the VGA cord is intentionally short to prevent a ghosting effect. Apparently, the longer that a VGA cable is, of course, the more line noise there is, or noise there is between the card and the monitor. And if the cord is too long, apparently it gives the gun problems. So the VGA cord being short is actually done on purpose. Next month, I hope to talk a little bit about a gun contest that they're going to have. They're going to have a game writing contest, and at the time of recording, I didn't have a lot of information on that. But there is a contest coming to write gun games that supports the Act Labs light gun. And in fact, we at Dark Unicorn Productions are probably going to release a title as well that actually works with the light gun too. So keep an eye out on their site for that. One of the big complaints that I've heard over the course of the last month is that people cannot use the light gun to play certain gun games, such as Terminator 2, Revolution X, and there's a couple of other ones that use that rapid fire approach where basically you hold the trigger down the whole time. Now, being that basically that flashing bright white light on the screen there, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Basically, these aren't gun games, folks. Despite the fact that the game has a gun on it, according to my research, these games are actually joysticks with a gun mounted and hooked to the joystick. So when you're moving that gun around, you're not really changing where the gun shoots physically. You're moving a joystick around. And of course, when you hold the trigger down, then it fires. So this is more of those games are joystick games, not really light gun games. And that flashing white, if you could rapid fire with that gun, your screen would be white all the time, and you wouldn't see any of the game. So that's why games like Terminator and Revolution X do not function properly with the Act Labs gun. Now, what about this flashing white issue? Now, I had one listener write in and give me the scoop on this whole flashing light gun thing. Basically, here's how it goes. The screen lights up white so that the gun can pick up a scan line on the screen to see where it is that you're shooting. And without that scan line, without being able to whiten the whole screen, the gun cannot retrieve the scan line and can't tell where you're shooting. Now, I also asked this guy, which by the way is JS, he gave me his initials, that's all I have from him. Basically, he offered up the concept that the newer games use a completely different type of sensor system. Because if you go and play Lost World or any of the new gun games, there isn't a white flash on the screen. And the guns are obviously not mounted on joysticks because they're detachable. I mean, you can take them in your hand away from the game. Basically what happens is there's actually a sensor ring around the entire screen, which looks basically for the gunshot, and it's a totally different sensor altogether. So basically it uses a different principle than the scanline pickup. Now, why couldn't we get a PC gun like that? Well, apparently the sensor for one gun, just the gun, not the stuff that has to be on the monitor, it's like $150. Now, I don't know about you, but I am not going to buy a light gun for $150. So, that being said, we're left with the scanline light gun. Now, what separates this ACT Labs from the other guns that I've taken a look at is other guns only work at certain refresh rates, and I think this is the real secret of their product. Most guns only work at 60 hertz and a very low screen resolution. Unfortunately, you don't see much 60 hertz going on anymore, and certainly you don't see anybody running in 640 by 480 anymore. That being the case, the ACT Labs light gun works on all resolutions and all refresh rates that I've tested it with so far. So that's a good thing. The other issues that I had over time, I've learned to compensate for. In the case of, say, Duck Hunt, which is interesting because Duck Hunt uses a slightly different scanning system. As I understand it, it draws a white box around each target to see if the light gun has hit it. That way it doesn't have to light up the whole screen. That's how the game worked in the arcade, which might be why the gun feels kind of different in Duck Hunt than it feels, say, in Crossbow or Operation Wolf. I've been playing a lot of Police Trainer. I don't know why, but I just keep going back to Police Trainer. I think it's a very cool game. Yeah, the graphics aren't cutting edge, and I mean, yeah, it's really, I mean, it's I don't know, it's like a shooting gallery, but I really enjoy it, and I think it's probably one of the best games that you can play with the light gun, and the light gun's almost made for it. So that kind of follows up what I was talking about the ACT Labs light gun last month. Recommendation: get the gun. It's very inexpensive, and for those of you who've been just itching to play Crossbow proper, this is how you do it. ACT Labs light gun. Now we've got the segment of the show where we talk about various little bits of information and news and goodies that we've picked up over the last month. We still haven't found a good title for this segment of the show, so suffice to say this is our various bits segment of the show where we talk about our little stuff. So, what's on the list this month? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is I've always been saying that I'd like to see something innovative done with the Quake 3 engine that everybody's so excited about. Now, in the past, I talked about a water slide game that was done on the Quake 3 engine. I think it was actually, it was the Quake 2 engine, I think. Anyway, it was a Quake engine, and basically this guy made a video game that had you basically playing cute little characters, a panda bear and a little girl and a turtle, standard Nintendo style stuff. But basically, it was a water slide race, and it was really cool. It was well done, and I was amazed to see that somebody actually hammered that out of a first-person shooter engine. Well, now they've taken up a new project, not the same people, but some other people working with the Quake 3 engine. They're making a version of Adventure, the old 2600 Explorer the Castle, Get the Sword, Slay the Dragon game for the 2600 is now being ported to the Quake 3 engine. Now, I know it's really hard to kind of envision this, okay? We're going to post, of course, a link to the website so you can see some screenshots of it. An interesting concept. And one thing, I'm kind of excited to see it myself, but one thing I think it's worth noting here, and I like to point out when I'm right, and less likely point out when I'm wrong, but I do own up to my mistakes. There are actually talk in the forums about problems that they're having making this game work because of what they call the limitations of the engine. Now, I don't really call those limitations, folks. The engine was built, was created, was designed to make first-person shooters. And I've always told you that. When you take an existing engine, what you get at the end, no matter how much work you do with it, no matter how much you cajole it, you end up with a game that resembles what the engine was made for. Now, the water slide game is like the only thing I've ever seen come out of the Quake engine. I've never seen anything out of the Quake 3 engine that doesn't look like a first-person shooter. You know, the same old first-person shooter over and over and over again. But adventure seems to be proving a little too much for the Quake 3 engine. I think that's just way too funny. The 2600 game is too much for the Quake 3 engine. Basically, they're having problems with lighting. Apparently, they can't get the game to be bright enough. And I've noticed that on every screenshot, you're carrying a gun. I don't seem to recall there being any gun in Adventure. So I'll be kind of curious to see how they remove inherent pieces of the engine to make it conform to a completely different style of game. This isn't to say I'm not excited to see it, folks. I think this is a totally killer project. I'm also excited to see that Archon project where they've got Archon running on a Quake 3 engine. I covered that, I think, either last month or the month before last. Very exciting, and I really take this sort of thing to heart, thinking that maybe the tide's going to change and the dominance of the multiplayer first-person shooter environment's going to somehow go away, and we're going to get something fresh and unique for a change. I'm not holding my breath, but it's nice to see these sort of little projects come up, and as soon as it comes out, of course, we'll give you a review here on the show. See what else is on the list this month. We ran across something interesting. We can't give you a link to it because it's mysteriously been pulled. My producer Brian actually found this and sent it to me, and I was just laughing. Microsoft has like a career site where they have all the jobs that they have available and all this other good stuff, and Brian actually located an ad, a job position at Microsoft that was basically looking for hackers with a computer science degree to work on the Xbox. Now, you know what? I think that's just totally funny, dude. I mean, that is just like the funniest stuff ever, to hear that Microsoft is hiring hackers. Probably trying to close their architecture before everybody in the world has a bootstrap loader to get by the boot process. Oh, it's pretty much too late. But the best thing Microsoft could do right now is embrace it. But we know Microsoft won't do that. Also in Microsoft news that relates to classic gaming, Microsoft bought Rare. Now that's kind of an interesting story there, huh? Rare, if you don't know who Rare is, they were one of the cutting-edge developers for the Super Nintendo. Coming out with, basically they invented the ray-traced platformer, Donkey Kong Country, those sort of games. Basically, Rare brought forth the concept of taking three-dimensionally rendered graphics and putting them in a 2D environment. The sort of things that Plug, that Dark Unicorn Productions is doing, Unplug. And of course, Rare was pretty much an exclusive Nintendo developer, as I recall. Now it's interesting to see that Microsoft has gotten their hands on Rare just to see what's going to happen. We're going to keep an eye on this one because I know how this industry works, folks. Rare is a team of very talented professionals. Now, my guess is that these talented professionals didn't have any say on the fact that Microsoft bought them. My guess would be that anybody that had a piece of the action at Rare. Now, if anybody who actually works for Rare or knows somebody who works for Rare that can give us the real story and insight, love to hear it. So I'm going to give you my conjecture until then. My guess is that anybody that had any sort of stake holdings in Rare got paid very handsomely for this purchase. And everybody else, the people that really do the work, the great developers that have created great titles, got the shaft. Now, I'm not saying that they got fired or terminated or there wasn't some good deal coming out of this, coming their way because of this. I'm telling you that I know how companies that are absorbed by Microsoft operate. Either they fold and their technology is absorbed by Microsoft, which is exactly what Microsoft wants. They want people to see a Microsoft game, not a Rare game. Okay? And basically what happens is the people who are working for a company that they loved and believed in are now working for the great Satan. And now that they're working for the great Satan, it's time to move on. Here is my predictions. You can write this one down. Under Microsoft's ownership, Rare will produce one excellent game for the Xbox. One excellent game. They may, and I doubt it, but they may produce a secondary, less than excellent game. Let's say a crap game. And then, Rare's just going to vanish. Microsoft will have absorbed the one or two programmers who are getting fat off the Microsoft teat, and the rest of them will go away, because nobody wants to work as a company acquired by Microsoft. And, you know, what's so funny is you'll never hear anybody who works for a company owned by Microsoft say that, because they love their job. But I have been actually working at companies that Microsoft is acquiring or working to acquire, and when you get around the scuttlebutt, nobody wants Microsoft to buy you. I mean, the executives do. The people with a stake want to Microsoft to buy them so they can get their fatty golden parachute and float off into the distance. The people who get screwed are the guys doing the work. And I have a feeling that the guys doing the work at Rare are going to be going bye-bye soon. Probably on their own choice. And we're going to see these developers turn up at Electronic Arts and other development houses that are not owned by Microsoft. Just my prediction, folks. I can't foresee the future, but I'm willing to bet I'm right on this one. A little update on our buddies over at X Arcade. That is, of course, the PC controller, the arcade made out of real arcade wood, as my intern likes to say. Oh, by the way, I'd like to welcome our intern, David Torres. I hope I pronounced his name right. I'm going to feel really bad if I mispronounced our intern's name. David is going to be working to get our database of shows up to snuff. He's going to be providing us with metadata, keyword searches, descriptions, lots and lots of links. So basically every show is very well covered. We're really glad to have him aboard, and we've really needed an intern. Especially at Classic Gaming Expo, we would have really done well to have an intern with us. So welcome, David, officially to the show. You'll be seeing his handiwork soon. But anyway, X Arcade is now shipping the GameCube and the Xbox adapters for their X Arcade. So you definitely want to get in on that if you own one of these consoles, heaven forbid. Now, they do have Dreamcast adapters and PlayStation 2 adapters already in production. It costs about $30 a pop for each adapter, and the controller is now down to a nice slim $149. So for under $2, you can get a PC controller and an adapter to adapt to the game system of your choice. A very good deal. Very quality controller. We've been very happy with ours. Also, I would like to note one thing. For those of you who may have an older X Arcade that got in on the X Arcade really early on in life, who are still experiencing that arrow programmability issue, if you have an X Arcade that has that problem, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Contact X Arcade directly, and they will send you a new encoder chip to handle that issue. Plus, I guess there were some problems with some multi-button combos, some sort of a ghosting issue. They fixed all those, and you can get a new encoder chip for your early X Arcade. The newer models, probably just about everybody who wasn't like right there at the beginning, they have the addition of the X Arcade that does not have those issues. So please do not write in unless you're sure that you have those issues, because I know X Arcade doesn't want to be sending encoder chips to people who don't need them. So, that's the X Arcade plug. A listener sent me in a link to the GP32. Now, the GP32, as some of you probably already know, is a Game Boy Advance competitor, which means you can pretty much write it off. I mean, I don't want to sound skewed, okay, but let's be honest. There's no room for more than one handheld in the industry. It's been proven time and time again. There's been Nintendo, and that's it. You know, because basically nobody else can match Nintendo's marketing power and prowess. Got to get those subliminals in for the kiddies, okay? Now, the GP32 is apparently superior pretty much in every way possible to the Game Boy Advance. More power, better screen. Basically it's the modern version of the Lynx, okay? Basically, it's what should be in charge but never will be. We will provide a link for you. Basically, it toots, according to this article, 4 times the CPU power, double the screen resolution, plus it has a built-in MP3 player and a bunch of future add-ons. And basically, it can give you the functionality of a Palm. Basically, the controls are better, a little bit better than the Game Boy Advance. It's got a 66 megahertz clock speed. There's tons of things you can look at. Basically, the batteries last as long on the GP32 as the Game Boy Advance does with an afterburner enhancement kit for it. As usual, you can't get one in the States. Sounds like the Amiga, huh? You can't get one in the States, and basically it's pretty tough to get your paws on one, but if this is the sort of thing that you're interested in, you definitely want to get in on it. Of course, there's not a lot of games for it, just as any other less than Nintendo orphan handheld would have. So you might want to look over the article, see if that's something. For those of you who collect handhelds, obviously you have to have one. Apparently it was showed at ECTS this last year and it had a good reception by the public, but I just don't see it giving a lot of competition to the Game Boy Advance. Now the Game Boy Advance, folks, I'm really wishy-washy on the topic. By the way, the price tag on that GP32 is $159, so that should give you kind of an idea. The Game Boy Advance that I was talking about, as you know, is attracted a lot of classic gaming developers. There's a lot of games being made like Speedball 2 from Bitmap Brothers and Chaos Engine. Chaos Engine alone is going to sell me one of the units. Okay. However, I'm going to hold out until Nintendo makes a backlit one, or I can buy one easily that's already pre-backlit. Because let's face it, they're starting to really produce the games that I want to play. And as I've said on a previous show, the Game Boy Advance is really the last vestige of 2D gaming left. It's not going to happen on consoles anymore, folks. People just won't tolerate real clean games. They have to have these polygon things. And my producer, I'm going to actually have him rant on a segment one day about polygons versus sprites, just to give you kind of an idea. But anyway, the Game Boy Advance is looking more and more attractive. The price is coming down. It's easier to get your hands on one. And, of course, there's lots of extended stuff. The Game Boy Advance has a new little toy out called the e-reader. It's basically a magnetic strip card reader that promises to add some amazing functionality to games. Basically, think about Pokemon cards with a magnetic strip that you can import characters to your favorite Pokemon game right through this card reader. They're even promising classic games like Donkey Kong and all that good stuff right there on these little magnetic cards that you can swap with your friends and just read them in. Apparently you can hold one game at a time inside this little add-on unit, so you can swipe the game in, play it, and then when you're done and you want to play something else, you swipe the other thing in. At least this time the component has something to do with gaming. Unlike cameras and web servers and everything else that people seem to want a handheld gaming system to do other than play games, this actually might have some bearing. Will the product take off? Who knows? It's an interesting concept, though, and at least Nintendo's being a little more innovative than most people these days that are doing the same old thing. That's going to wrap it up for our little bits edition segment. I don't know what we're going to call this thing. Suffice to say, we will be bringing you more little bits each month on this segment of the show. As you all know, folks, for the last few years there has been in development something that we've all been waiting for, a modern version of Dragon's Lair, that time-tested and true game that started off as a Laserdisc interactive cartoon, compliments of Don Bluth, Rick Dyer, Gary Goldman, and John Pomeroy, and a lot of people who took a risk and spent some bucks to create one of the video games of, I think, two that are in the Smithsonian Institute. I think Dragon's Lair is right next to Pac-Man. Dragon's Lair, of course, if you haven't heard my dedicated Dragon's Lair show, you can get all the information from that. But just for those of you who may have just tuned in, of course, we covered Dragon's Lair quite a bit on the show. We feel it's one of those paradigm shifts where things really changed in the video game industry. Well, Dragon's Lair 3D promises to do no less for the modern age. While Dragon's Lair 3D may, on the surface, look like another Me Too Tomb Raider-style adventure game, with the magic of cel-shaded animation, a complete engine written from scratch. When's the last time you saw that? and a team of unbelievable creative professionals, including Mr. Don Bluth himself and Rick Dyer, both from the original team, and a very great team of programmers and developers, we are going to get coming apparently this month to consoles, shortly to follow the PC, and then at the end of the development cycle, the Mac, we are going to get Dragon's Lair 3D. Dragon's Lair, but fully interactive, with all the same beauty and grace that the original game had, but this time fully controllable. Now, you guys have probably seen and heard enough about that. We're going to give you a little information from the man himself, Don Bluth, who for this particular occasion, for Dragon's Lair 3D, created a complete new 45-second introduction, all traditional hand-drawn animation for Dragon's Lair 3D. You've probably seen the trailer on your favorite TV show from Tech TV or from G4, and we got to see it last year, the introduction. We didn't get to actually see it this year because we were too busy, but last year we got to see it, and it was really cool despite the fact they had some stand-in sound effects and voices. But it's nice to know that the boys haven't lost their touch. Don Bluth is also working with Gary Goldman and some other great folks on the Dragon's Lair movie. And, of course, we're going to cover that information for you as we know more. But for now, how about we talk to Don Bluth himself at the Classic Gaming Expo 2002 and hear what he has to say not only about his past, but also about what's coming in the future. I give you Don Bluth.
This is Shane R. Monroe with Retro Gaming Radio at Classic Gaming Expo 2002. I'm here with the legend, the person that you've all told me that I shouldn't talk so much about on my show. This is Don Bluth. And again, as I've told you with the people that I've interviewed today, if you do not know who this man is, you should find a different radio show. Because this is the man. This is the man I've told you all about for the last 3 years. We have him here with us today. Don, thank you for stopping in with us. Really appreciate it. Can you give us a little background, how you started off in animation, how it led to Dragon's Lair, and where you're at now?
Okay. Actually, I got into animation so many years ago that I lost count because I got interested in the medium when I was about 4, and it was just from seeing animation pictures. And over the years, of course, I just kept saying someday I want to do that for a living. So when I grow up, finally get out of high school, and I'm not going to college, I am going to go into animation. And of course, at that time, it was Disney, and that's where I wanted to go.
Absolutely.
But and I worked at Disney when Disney was actually there at the studio, so I thought it was really, really exciting. There was one year we were making a picture called Sleeping Beauty.
No one's heard of that.
Everyone's heard of
No one's heard of that one.
So anyway, I worked there for about a year, and then I just went and finished college, and I don't know why I just got back into just getting an education. But then in 1971, I went back to the Disney studio, and Walt was gone now. He died in '66.
Right.
And I started noticing little things. That the product they were making they were starting to cut corners here and there because the stockholders were demanding more and more profit.
Absolutely.
So I met a young man there, about a little younger than I am, by 7 years, a guy named Gary Goldman, and we started talking, and we saying, they're starting to stop doing things like shadows and transparent things and double passes to the camera to get double exposure. It's a lot of things that we had grown up with in the old Disney movies and have been really kind of attracted to it. So he said they kept cutting it, and we were working on a picture called Rescuers, and I noticed that even in the mice they took the white out of the eyes and just painted it all skin color.
Interesting.
And I said, why are they doing this? And the answers we kept getting from the management is it's too expensive. You can't do it anymore the way they used to do it.
Right.
We weren't very happy with that.
Understandably so.
So then we went to the 9 old men that were still there.
The 9 old men?
Yeah.
These were like the 7 dwarves plus 2, right?
Yeah, I don't know where this term came from, but there were more than 9. But we go talk it out with them, and they said, well, you just have to go where the company's going. Then we used to ask them, because we were trying to learn how to be good animators, we would ask them, how is it that you do this? Like in Fantasia, when that water, where the little broom carried the water in the bucket, it looked really transparent. How did you make that effect on the screen?
Right.
I remember Frank Thomas saying to me, I don't remember what we did. I don't remember how we did that. I think we did it with lacquer on the cells, and I think we dyed it, but I don't remember. We never wrote that down.
Wow.
And we started noticing that there were many places that They hadn't written it down, and they weren't sure.
No.
So Gary Goldman, John Pomeroy, and myself decided that we need to start asking questions and find out what these guys could remember that they didn't write down. But we ran out of questions to ask. Because we couldn't even think of what to ask them.
Right,
So at some point what we did is we said, well, look, let's go make a little film in our garage after hours at night. And if we make this film, surely the questions will surface. Then we'll go back and ask them.
That makes sense. Interesting.
Yeah, so we did. So we made a picture called Banjo the Woodpile Cat, which was simply an experiment to see if we could put together a film, not just be animators, but direct. And as we did this, we got more and more interested and found out that a lot of the things we were being told weren't exactly true, that you could put these things on the screen and it wasn't that hard to do, and it wasn't a matter of money. So why wasn't the Disney studio doing it? So we go back to them, and of course, all we did is annoy them. So at some point, we said, this isn't going to get better here. We're going to have to go out and do it on our own if we want the art to go on growing. So in 79, I believe it was, 1979, we gave them our resignations and went out to make a picture called The Secret of Nim.
This was 79 that you left?
I believe that was it, 1979, September 13th. So we went out and made the picture, and we were quite sure The Secret of Nim, we were going to be able to put back a lot of the beautiful things that animation can do.
Yes.
And we tried really hard to put it back there, made it for $6.5 million, and then we thought, well, certainly this is going to make money.
Right.
But it didn't. And it didn't get distributed very well because at that time there was a whole travesty going on with MGM and UA, and UA was our distributor. Only UA got sold to MGM.
Right.
So we became kind of like an orphan film that didn't have a real parent. And they said, we're not going to put any money in distributing Secret of Nim.
Well, and so there's no truth behind that shadowy tale that Disney was like running around telling people not to show your film.
It could be. Could be there.
You'd rather not confirm nor deny that statement.
You know what? I don't know whether they did that or not. I know on many occasions they've been in the ring, battling with us, but it's just part of the game.
Was it really? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt your story too long and get you off track, but was it an ugly breakup with Disney when you guys left? I mean, you took yourself and was a handful of your artists with you?
Yeah, there were the three of us and, 14 others. So it's a total of 17.
And that would be, what a percentage of their compilation at the time? I mean,
not a very big percentage
at all.
So
you didn't, take half their staff?
No, not at all. And I think the press just liked to play it up like it was some big spectacular thing. And Disney was not happy,
I'm sure they weren't very happy.
So, but what happened because NIM didn't work, and because we had a staff out there now, and we said, all right, now, NIM didn't work, and the money didn't come back in, how are we going to make another picture?
Right.
We were working with a company called Aurora at the time.
I'm familiar with them.
Aurora was our executive producers.
Gotcha.
And they had funding lined up to do a picture right after NIM, which fell through. So we said, we're sitting here in a boat without a motor. And it was about that time that a young man named Rick Dyer, who had seen The Secret of NIM, looked at it and said, you know what, those are the guys I want to do Dragon's Lair. And so he called us on the phone, came up to see us up in Ventura, we're on Ventura Boulevard there in Hollywood. Came up to see us and he says, I have an idea for a Laserdisc game in which a player can look at a piece of film, and if he pushes the right buttons and moves the right joystick at the right time, what will happen is you'll get to watch the next little piece of film. And it will randomly access on this Laserdisc, it'll interact with this player.
And
we said,
for my listeners, understanding that this was, 1981-ish?
83.
And, I mean, everyone's like, DVD, well, that's no big deal. But back then, this was like the hottest technology going. I mean, no one had seen this stuff really yet, right?
No, it hadn't been done before. And we didn't even know what we were doing. So I sat down with Gary and with John, and we said, okay, how do we make a game out of this? And how do we turn that into a series of scenes that the animators can animate? And we finally figured out that if we set up a threat situation in which Dirk was threatened by some kind of an enemy, and then you stop the film right there, just for a tiny little second, and in that little window, the player has to react, either by moving the joystick or pushing the sword button. And if he does it at the right time, then we'll let him go on watching the next part of the film where he defeats the villain, where Dirk actually, gets out of trouble. finally it got really easy, the whole concept. So then the fun was, how many creative ways can we find to show Dirk,
Right.
you know, get rid of the villain? And if he doesn't do it right, how many creative ways can we show Dirk dying? So we used to rack our brains just trying to figure that out.
Were there any times that you had to tone down a Dirk death? I mean, there's a couple of scenes where he gets impaled by the sword, things that were kind of, let's say, like less Disney-ish,
Yeah.
I guess, for lack of a better word.
Well, we tried to keep it very tongue-in-cheek, because I knew
Sure.
if we took it seriously and actually trying to do something highly dramatic, you know, that we'd never pull it off.
Sure.
And Dirk is really such a bungling kind of a hero that you laugh at him rather than feel too sorry for him.
Right.
And it kind of reminds you of every person.
Right.
In that respect. But we had no idea that Dragon's Lair was going to be a big hit. We just simply thought it would pay the salaries.
Pay the bills for a while.
Until we could get the next feature going.
Right.
And the other thing that was very strange, too, is that week to week it was trying to find the money to raise payroll, and the money came from the strangest places. And sometimes I remember one week the money came in a brown paper bag, and we had to go to we went to the bank and tried to get them to let us put it in the bank, and they're all the time saying, "Where did you get this?"
Oh,
where's this
no.
So, I mean, there's funny stories. But we managed to get ourselves all the way through it and put it out there, and it took us very much by surprise to see how enthusiastically it was embraced and how people just wanted to play this game. And the second surprise was that a video game really doesn't stay on the shelf in a store for much longer than 3 to 5 years.
Right.
And over the last 18 years, Dragon's Lair has remained on the shelves, which we can't quite explain. So it was about 4 years ago that Rick Dyer came to Gary and I. We were working Fox at the time doing a movie called Titan AE. And Rick came to us and said, you know, we still have this franchise. And with all of the new technology nowadays, we could make a 3D Dragon's Lair game in which the player would really have control over Dirk's actions. Not just watching a film. He could move him around and decide whether he tumbled or jumped or flew or fell or whatever. We said, wow. He said, can you do that now? And they said, yeah. I said, could you make it look like a cartoon instead of a 3D character?
Right.
And they said, yeah, there's a software out there called Toon Shader.
Right, cell shading technology.
That's right. He says, we can do it with that. And we said, well, yeah, let's do it. So we all agreed, and that was 4 years ago. And oddly enough, the experience of making this new game has been very similar to making the first game, in that every week we're hunting for where the money's going to pay the staff to make this game. So we've had a lot of deja vu in making it, and finally,
it's interesting the full circle that's come around with this.
I can't really believe it.
That's
and then
wild.
It's about to go, I think, into the market latter part of October. So we're pretty sure right now it's going to make it, and it's on every modem. So you know, whatever
platform,
every platform you want to see it. Yeah.
What's How do you feel about the way that Dragon's Lair has taken off? I mean, obviously for you it was a job, and like you said, it was a vessel for keeping your company alive.
Yeah.
And when Dragon's Lair just took off and they shipped something like $30 million worth of units in a week or something like that, it was just how does somebody come to grips with something like that? I mean,
it was
that's amazing.
No, it was an enormous thing, and there were lines around the arcades for people to get in and play them. And
I was in there.
and I could not believe that. And then they said, you know, they're putting quarters in, right? And someone said, no, they're putting 50 cents in some cases. And I went, 50 cents? They're lined up to put 50 cents in this game. And I was incredulous about it. I could not believe it was happening.
It's amazing.
But it's strange because in the Dragon's Lair game, and not many people know this, there's really only 15 minutes of animation.
Right.
But it's positioned so that it seems like more.
With the reversed levels and some of the other little tricks there.
And in Gary's and my career and John's, we've made 11 feature films. And the legacy that we'll leave behind is only 15 minutes, I think, of animation, and I can never figure that out either.
Well, do you understand, I mean, like I said, I've talked about you like so many times on the show, people actually write and say, will you stop talking about Don Bluth for like 5 minutes and let us talk about somebody else?
Good.
Because I've always been a big fan.
It's good advice.
It's probably so, and I don't want to get too dry with that.
Yeah.
But the questions that people have asked me that I've always wondered myself, things like that,
Now, we talked a little bit about Secret of NIMH last year at the show, and I know that things didn't work out very well with that. Lots of people write to me and say, why has this film gotten such horrible treatment? Why is the DVD basically kind of a crap release? I mean, we saw Titan AE. Yeah. Titan AE was like one of the best DVD releases of its time frame. And then we've got Secret of NIMH, which personally I like Secret of NIMH better than Titan AE, but I own them both. I own 2 copies of Secret of NIMH, actually, one unopened. I figured it'd be cheesy to have you sign one for me here. Yeah. But
I think the market the pictures are always driven by the market. And if Titan AE went out and made a lot of money, then Titan AE will get the money that'll keep driving it if it gets legs. I think what happened with Secret of NIMH, and it was unfortunate, was that there was no money spent on prints and ads and just marketing that picture. And because the picture went out there and didn't make a whole lot of money. And because it made a whole lot of money, then it is judged as a picture that is not popular and no one wants to see it. Now, there's a lot of people who have seen it who like the movie a lot. But still, the final judgment on the picture was it didn't make money, so it must be no good.
And crazy.
That's the way the business works. Unless a picture makes money, it won't live. It'll die.
Do you feel that with today's very, very popular independent film style, I mean, there are movies that people have shot for $20,000 that go on and make, like Blair Witch Project. They took the camcorder back after they shot the movie because they couldn't afford to keep it. But it went on to make unbelievable amounts of money. Is there something that... Could Secret of NIMH be a vassal to bring? Could something like that be brought back, do you think, if MGM would allow it?
If MGM would allow, but MGM right now, doesn't have the vision to do that. They every time we call them and talk about it, they say yeah, and then they don't want to talk about it. They said it's a movie that's over and it's not going to make any money.
And so let's real quickly now. Dragon's Lair 3D is going to be coming out at the end of October.
Correct.
On all major platforms, and that's being released by Dragonstone Software officially.
Correct.
Now, you actually partook in doing the animation for this, or the introduction?
There is 45 seconds, almost a minute of 2D animation that's brand new in this new 3D game.
That's what we saw last year.
Yeah, no, there's more.
Oh, there's more. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you secure getting Daphne and Dirk's voice for the...
We were able to get Dirk's voice, Dan Molina, to come back. We actually took Vera Lamfer and asked her if she would come back and do Daphne once again, but we found a new voice for Daphne, which is a dead ringer for the old one.
Excellent. So, it was really apparent in the last video, wasn't her?
No, but Vera just doesn't have the chops to go there anymore. She's older now, and so those high notes are really hard to hit.
Okay. Dragon's Lair movie, do you have anything you want to talk to about that really quick?
Dragon's Lair movie, we have a script that is finished and has gotten really, really good marks. There's a couple of studios looking at it who maybe would like to do it live action. We're kind of holding out because we'd like to do it in animation.
Would it be traditional animation?
Yes.
No CG?
No, well, there'll be a little CG. There always
CG
is.
assistance, but not Titan AE style CG.
I call it 2D, where it's actually hand-drawn.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you so much, Don, for dropping by the Classic Gaming Expo 2002. I'm sure we'll be talking to you later. Thank you so much for stopping in.
Okay.
There you have it, folks. The magical Don Bluth, the man that I've been seeking an interview. One of the reasons this show came about was to finally find and meet and interview Don Bluth. Now, this is just a mini interview, folks. We've got a much bigger interview planned with Don Bluth in the near future, right here from his studios in the Phoenix, Arizona area. We're going to actually go to his studio, and we're going to get the real scoop about all sorts of cool stuff. And I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but there's some cool stuff coming. And Don and Gary are going to give us the full meal scoop. This is sort of an interesting turning point for Retro Gaming Radio, because there were basically two people that I said I really wanted to meet and interview, and I would feel that my job, that what I've been trying to strive for on this show, would be done. And that was Don Bluth and Paul Norman, which, of course, if you've heard Paul Norman's interview, Paul Norman was the guy behind Cosme, the early programmers of the Commodore 64 that produced really cutting-edge games, created games that far and exceeded games at the time, things like context-sensitive music, the passage of time in video games. They really pioneered and innovated a lot of stuff that, without it, we may not have seen today. And of course, they were doing that back in the early 80s for the Commodore 64. So, Paul Norman was always somebody that really inspired me to program. And of course, Paul Norman's a great guy, just as Don Bluth is. And you wouldn't think so, You'd think that all of these people that you've met, all these people that that you grew up worshiping would turn out to be, less than generous kind of people that wouldn't talk to you and kind of turn their nose up. But these are like regular guys that are just as excited to talk to you as you are to talk to them. It's phenomenal. It's something that I haven't been able to really express to people. I've managed to meet a lot of my heroes over the course of time. I'm working on a Dino Eggs conversion from the Commodore 64 to the PC. It also was out for the Apple II as well. I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. It originated on the Apple. We're doing a port of that game, Dark Unicorn Productions is. And basically, I got to, I've been in touch with the original author of Dino Eggs, and he's let me look at his source code, and he answers questions for me. And the guy's just like totally down to earth, and it's like totally thrilling to be able to meet these guys, either in person or even in email, just to be able to talk to some of the great people that pioneered this stuff. And these interviews that you're going to hear over the coming months are really that. I mean, it's our own form of hero worship, but we get the goods to pass on to you. So, anyway, we'll be interviewing more with Don Bluth at a later date, so stick around. Well, folks, before we close up the show, I'd like to take an opportunity to invite you all to participate in a little contest we're throwing. The prize will be 2 Dragon's Lair figurines, compliments of Don Bluth and Company. This is the Dirk and Daphne set of the new Dragon's Lair 3D figurines. You can see them just about anywhere. They're for sale in just about every store, including Walmart and all that good stuff. We're going to give away 2 of those, a matching pair with Daphne and Dirk. Again, that'll be compliments of Don Bluth and Company, which his official site, by the way, is donbluth.com. Should give ourselves a little plug for our prize donators. The contest, folks, is going to be naming our various bits segment of the show. Now, we just can't come up with a name or a cool topic for the segment of the show where we talk about little things that have happened around the net, little stuff, that we kind of hammered through this episode. So if you have a really cool idea for a name for that segment of the show, send it along to RetroGaming at RetroGamingRadio.com. We will go through it, myself and my producer, and the name that we choose to name the segment will win the figurines. We will send them right to your house. So when you send in your submission, please give us your snail mail address so that we can ship these guys to you. So please go ahead and send that in. We'd love to have one of our listeners come up with a cool name, and we'd love to give away these 2 killer Dragon's Lair 3D figurines. So write us on in. Okay, folks, well, that's going to wrap up this edition of Retro Gaming Radio. I'm Shane R. Monroe, your host, saying until next time, keep it retro.